What's up, Grovelanders? We're back with another at-home project. This time we're refurbishing some furniture. This, my friends, is a dresser from a Disney resort. We did get 2 of them, so Colleen and I had matching dressers. These dressers came from the Boardwalk Villas Resort, and it says Hidden Mickey on the label, but they're not very hidden. They're right there in the fronts of these 3 drawers. So you got 3 big drawers that pull out fully, and then 1 open spot where they put maybe the cable box, something like that, maybe a TV on top or a TV mounted on the wall above. I don't know. But we're going to figure out a use for this space too. I was thinking about putting maybe a secondary floor on a track that you can pull out to put wallets, keys, things like that on, or maybe just baskets. I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go. I pulled the drawers out of this one already, and I covered the floor. I am prepping to get ready to work. And you may be asking, how did you get your hands on resort furniture? Well, if you're in the Lakeland area of Florida, we're about 50 minutes to an hour drive. There is a place called the Lakeland Antique Mall. It's basically a giant warehouse of vendors selling from very cheap, inexpensive collectors things to more high-end, more expensive things. And a few of those vendors go to auctions and buy furniture that's left over from Disney resorts. When they do refurbishments and refreshing of rooms, they tear all the furniture out, and then these vendors go to the auctions and buy it to resell it. These 2 dressers right here were only $95 each. I don't know that you're gonna find a dresser this big, solid wood for $95, but we don't like the look of it. It doesn't match the color scheme of our room, so what I'm gonna do is clean it, remove the stickers, fix the blemishes with some wood filler and sanding, and then we're painting them white to match the furniture that we have in our room. We also don't like these drawer pulls, so I'm going to be removing these, filling these holes, and then installing a single pull knob type thing that will match. Oh, check this out. I got a mirror from the Pirates of the Caribbean. They had pirate themed rooms at Disney resorts. There was dozens of these mirrors in one of the vendors' areas. I got this one for $45. There is some blemishes, that's why it was cheaper. They were initially $200. A couple of them marked down to $100 to $60. This one was $60, but the vendor was there the day that I went and bought this furniture, and he was willing to part with it for $45. We also got 2 matching mirrors for the owner's bathroom of this house because we don't like the giant contractor mirror. We would like 2 separate individual mirrors, but these are from the Polynesian. They have a little tiki design on them, if you can see it, and some blemishes to fix on these, but that will be a project for another day. We have plenty of work cut out for us today. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove these knobs from all of the drawers, get rid of them, and then take these drawer fronts off of the actual drawer, because we're not going to touch anything of this. We're just going to be dealing with this piece of the drawer. And do that for all of the drawers, and we'll move on to the next thing. Figured I should show you how to remove a drawer too, because they are not all the same. They all pretty much operate the same, but how you remove them is different. Some of them just have a center track plus the glides on the side, and the center track kind of keeps them in place, and you just give it a good tug and it pulls off. But these have the latching mechanisms. So one side has a latch right here, you can see it depresses up or down. This one you depress up, and then the other side you depress down at the same time, and then you can pull the drawer out. It releases the drawer from the side sliders. We've got 1 drawer front off, so those I'm going to start just lining up over here, but we basically don't need anything with these. At some point I am going to check the sliders to make sure their condition is good, as well as the hardware. Nothing is loose, so I'll be checking them later, but you basically put them out of the way somewhere. You put it on the drawer pulls and hardware right here, a bag of the drawer face screws that hold them on in case I can reuse them. So far these were not stripped. They've been coming out pretty quickly, and they have some resistance, so there's nothing very loose. So hopefully all the drawers are that way, and I can just reuse the same screws to put them back together. Alright, we got all the drawer fronts off, all the hardware off. Next thing I'm going to do is remove these stickers here, and for that I just got a plastic spatula. I didn't want to use metal, obviously, to ruin the finish any more than it already is, so I'm just slightly lightly go around the edges here to remove the bulk of the sticker. If you're lucky, sometimes they just pop off because it doesn't really stick terribly to the finish. That one wasn't too bad, so you can see a little bit of residue left right there. And that is what this is for. Spray this on there, wipe it off. You might have to do it a couple times if it's a lot of residue. You might be going through a lot of this, but it eventually comes off and it does not ruin the finish. Once you let that Goo Gone soak into the residue a little bit, just take this plastic scraper and it kind of just pushes off the finish. This one is all coming off. Like I said, if you have a lot of residue, you're going to have to do this multiple times, but this is just a thin layer of adhesive, so this is coming off pretty easy. And you just take a rag and wipe all the excess Goo Gone and overspray off. So even if you're not refinishing and painting furniture and you just want to get stickers off of it, that's also how you do it. For my next trick, I'm just going to wipe them down dry, get the dust off, hair, anything that might be on the outside or and down back inside that little cubby there. Before I do the wet wiping, I'll just do some light dusting. Ooh, there's something sticky. That's what we're gonna clean. Ooh-wees. For the next step, I'm just gonna spray them with Silver Green and wipe them down. Spray it down and wipe it down. Don't forget the drawer front. So we got these wiped down and washed. And this was a white rag. They weren't terribly dirty, but there were some areas that obviously had some grime. But we are now just dry wiping these, and then we'll wash these and let it dry a bit before we apply the wood filler. Now that the cleaning is all done, we're going to do a little sanding. So any areas like this that are chewed up and a little rough, we're going to sand and try to clean that up a little bit so that our wood filler can adhere the best. So anywhere where there's little things like this, I'll just go over lightly with some sandpaper. I got different grit sandpaper here. If there's bad areas that need a lot of sanding, this is a little rougher. And then this is a little finer. This one's a little finer than that one, and this one is like a fine grit. So, and they are sponges, so they will contour around edges. That's why I got this instead of just regular sandpaper. I have not used this thin of sponge. I've used these sponges before, but first time trying these out. I thought they were neat because they flex a lot. Well, it wasn't terrible. There wasn't too many noticeable gouges. The front of each one has this same type of thing here, so obviously sand it, get some of the gloss finish off around that area, and then just use the dry duster to get all the excess dust off. A little bit on this side here, front of this one, and that's about it. So for the filler, I'm basically going to use the same plastic spatula I used to scrape the adhesive off. And you basically take a little bit of that and fill your area. Now, you basically want to use just enough to fill that space, because otherwise you're going to be wasting your time sanding it down. This filler does not need to be stirred. I read the instructions, surprisingly. Basically taking your wood filler and filling wood, trying to keep as little as possible. Deeper gouges or holes could take 2 to 3 layers of this. This is kind of gritty. You can hear the gritty contents of this filler. It's basically sawdust paste. So that's how that one's filled. There we go. That's better lighting. And then when that's dry, 24 hours or so, tomorrow maybe, we will sand that and see if that blends with the rest of the finish on either side. So now I'll just go around and hit these little blemishes, little nicks and dings all over both of them. Alright, we're all done applying the wood filler, and across filling the holes of the drawer pulls here. I'm just going to clean up my tools. I did try to use a wider blade because some of these drawer pulls had some chipped paint around them, so I used a wider blade for that, but it did end up getting too messy, so I went back to the smaller blade and it started looking a lot better. So there's going to be less to sand when that's all dry. So that's all we can do today. Hopefully all this can be dry tomorrow, so I can go back tomorrow and start sanding it, because there's still a lot to do. So I'm going to clean up my tools, and I'll see you later. Well, it's been a hot minute since I've worked on these dressers, literally probably like 2 weeks, but we are back finally at it, and the wood filler is definitely dry enough now. I have these flexible sanding sponges. I've never used something this flexible for sanding before, but we're gonna see how that does so I can get into the contours the best. Well, I thought I was recording, but apparently I wasn't, because I got this pretty good and then saw that it wasn't actually recording what I was trying to do. But basically I take the sponge block here, you know, knock off all the heavy filler, and then I have a medium grit sponge pad and a fine grit here. So just work your way down till it feels smooth. One thing I did notice, these are not ideal for getting into hard corners here, so I had to take a screwdriver, and I did a little bit around the side too. Basically there was some heavy filler across this top edge, so I basically just took the screwdriver and scraped off the heavy stuff. So here's another spot. Basically just take the screwdriver and carefully scrape that heavy filler off to keep your edge before you start sanding. Even though the wood filler is dry, it does scrape pretty easy, and you can keep some of the detail here, because now I'm just gonna take the sanding block, sand the flats smooth. Doesn't take much. Some of these areas are very little damage, so I don't want to over sand. I can still feel some rough bumps across that top edge. And of course, you also do not want to scrape too much off, or else you're gonna have to go back and refill. It's hard to do this one-handed. That's pretty good. You basically just want to keep sanding it until it matches the contour of the original finish. I am working on these drawer fronts now, where I filled the old pull handle holes. This one I got a little carried away. That was the first one. And then I got lighter and lighter amounts. So they shouldn't be too bad to sand, but this one was. Sanding block took quite a bit of time, but it is smooth now. I can't even feel any blemish where those holes were. And that's one drawer face finished. So once we get all this prep done, finally we can paint.
Much later.
We're back after another couple of weeks to keep working on these dressers because they have to get done. I'm tired of them taking up the space. So they are all prepped for primer. The only thing I gotta do is just scuff up the finish on the flats. And it's taking forever because I just got over flu last week, and now I think I might have pneumonia. My voice is very hoarse from coughing a lot, but they need to get done. We have family coming in around Christmas, so that's a few weeks away. Got to get these done and out of the space so we can actually put a bed in here. So I'm just going to take a fine grit sanding pad and do this across every flat, shiny surface. This one's all sanded, as you can see. I think I said sand all the flats, but no, you just want to sand all over the glossy surfaces, not just the flats. And you don't want to take the finish completely off. You just want to scuff it, so, you know, lightly sanding. And then we gotta clean all the dust off.
A few minutes later.
I just wiped this thing down twice. So I wiped it down with a damp rag one time, let it dry, and then it checked, and you could kind of see some areas where the dust had built up and smeared around instead of coming off. So I just cleaned the rag and wiped it a second time, so it's looking much better. We're about ready to take it outside. And outside is where I have this overspray tent set up. Yeah, that's right. I'm gonna spray these. I bought a Wagner home decor sprayer. It's designed for chalk paint, and I watched some videos ahead of time. It looks pretty simple. The setup is the most time-consuming thing. This tent I struggled with. I'll put some of that video in as I'm talking. I'm going to do one dresser at a time, so that way while the primer is drying on the first dresser, I can go sand the other dresser and kind of maximize my time. So let's bring that other dresser out right now. And here it is. Again, it went in pretty smooth. I have some heavy-duty cardboard that I put it on too to keep it off the floor of this tent a little bit, so it makes it easier to get the edge. But we're going to get the paint ready. For this job, I got Kills 3 Premium. It's high hide interior-exterior primer, and it is super thick. I already stirred it. Originally, I was going to brush and roll this on, not spray it. If you're going to spray, you definitely don't want to use thick paint or primer, so we are going to have to thin this. So I have my little container here. We're going to dump some of this out so we can thin this to put it in the spray. And I do apologize, this is not going to be a tutorial on how to use this Wagner sprayer or how to thin paint or how to prep any of the paint. I really need to get this job done, so I'm basically going to fly through that stuff and just show the refurbishing only of these dressers. There are plenty of videos out there on the internet as far as how to use this particular sprayer or the right ways to thin the paint, things like that. So I'm going to move along and not go step by step onto setting up this sprayer. I'm just going to get it done. Thinned paint is in here, and you can actually change the direction of your nozzle, either horizontal or spin it for vertical. And I got a little test piece there. I'm going to test first before I start spraying this, just to get the volume of primer accurate. Alright, that's not too bad. We're going to start on the sides here in case something does look off. It's not going to be as noticeable as if it's on the front or the top. So let's get moving. And this one is all primed. And here's one issue you got to do is definitely adjust your volume better. I had to turn it way down from what I initially was using because I keep getting drips. So you just got to keep a brush with you and brush them off as you find them. And then before we paint, we're going to do some sanding anyway to smooth some edges if there's more buildup. But this is just primer, so it doesn't have to look 100% pretty at this stage of the game. Well, you can see I had a ton of dripping over here. I'm still wiping this. There's so much paint. Dripping, dripping, dripping. But like I said, it's just the primer. And one other issue I found was it's hard to get under the detail down below, right under these things. So unless you're willing to like paint some of your furniture, let it dry, spin it, paint more, which I'm not willing to do. We'll basically just have to, when we paint, take the brush and just touch up underneath some of the detail. We are now going to sand this bad boy while the other one is drying out there with the primer, and then we'll switch them. We got the second one done, and let me tell you, it is much nicer knowing where the setting should be. We had zero dripping on this one. Did not have to brush anything. And it was perfect coat, and one canister of paint was enough to do this whole dresser plus all of the drawer faces. So the drawer faces are primed too. Now, it's a little humid today, so I gotta bring everything in so that it can dry. It's a little too humid right now for it to dry quickly, and I got things to do. So finally, we've got the priming done, and we'll be ready to paint next time.
Several days later.
It's been a couple of days, so now we're ready to finally paint the dressers so we can maybe get these into our bedroom tonight. I already sanded this one lightly on all flat surfaces, a little more so on the top, because that's the most prominent, to make sure I get any blemishes out from the primer, and that feels good. And we are using Rust-Oleum chalk paint, white matte chalk paint, and I already thinned the chalk paint. I just follow the instructions on the Wagner sprayer here as to how to thin the different types of paint, so we're ready to go. half, and I got this whole dresser done and the drawer faces. They're still shiny wet, but this is drying pretty quick. I did have to brush some heavy stuff. I don't know if you can see it in the camera. There's some brush strokes. I'm not too worried about that. Again, this is my first time using chalk paint as well as a sprayer to apply it, and so far it's looking pretty good. There are some blemishes, but I'm not going to spend any more time on it. It's looking like it's covering in one coat as well. It does say one coat should be all that's needed on the can of chalk paint. Uh-oh, there's another run. So let's see if I can hit that before it dries. Good, it's still wet enough. Now this is going to leave some brush strokes in the finish, but guess what? It's the side of the dresser, so I'm not terribly concerned. I don't see any more. It's just right here. A foam brush might be better, but I don't have any. It's the only brush I got. This is because I went around, I did an initial coat, and then I double checked and I could see some dark streaks through these areas, so I did a quick once over, and that's what made it a little too heavy. So maybe I'm trying to do it in one coat so I don't have to do a second coat. I am on the #1 setting, so it's not spraying heavy, but I'm going over it a little bit too much in some areas. But again, my first time. Live and learn. So after I did the priming, I went to the doctor and I do a pneumonia. So I've laid low for a couple days. I have meds in me. I'm getting better, but I'm gonna take a rest right now while that coat dries on that dresser before I pull it out of there and put the second one in and paint that. I am still gonna have to do some touch up once it's in the room too, with a little brush up underneath some of the details around the edges. I can't get the sprayer up underneath there properly. We haven't decided on what kind of drawer pull we want yet, so I'm gonna have to put that on at some point too.
2 days later.
After the paint was good and dry, it was time to move the dressers upstairs. And I quickly found out they wouldn't make the turn on our landing. So I recruited some muscle and we lifted them up onto the banister on a moving blanket and slid them up to the top. Now it's time for drawer knob install. I measured where I wanted the knobs to be installed. I grabbed a drill bit that's just a little bigger than the screw itself. I drilled through the drawer face and then I checked that the screw fits in the hole. I drilled the other hole, cleaned up my mess, and flipped the drawer face. I grabbed another drill bit that's slightly bigger than the screw head. I carefully drilled the back side deep enough to countersink the screw head. I determined how much thread I needed to screw the knob on, and I broke off what I didn't need using pliers. Insert the screw and screw on the knob. Now just do that 11 more times. To mount the drawer faces, I matched the numbers I wrote when I took the drawers apart. Cha-ching! I inserted the screws through the drawer and aligned them with the holes on the back of the drawer face. Insert the rest of the screws and tighten. And voila! I even replaced the knobs on my nightstand to match. After the drawers were all finished, it was time for some touch-up. The dressers did get pretty scuffed just bringing them up the steps. I took a foam roller and went over all the flats of the dresser and used a brush to hit any spots the roller couldn't. And after all that, we finally have refurbished Disney Resort dressers. And that's going to do it for another project video. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to catch all the upcoming project videos coming out. And remember, time is everything, money is a tool, and we can't afford to waste either one. Last tag.